Trojan Horse, Part 1, Chapter 4. Evil watched Elmo go through checking 3 men of his team. They were in full camouflage uniforms with black watch caps on their heads. Their load-bearing equipment was weighted down with ammunition magazines, grenades, spare batteries, optics, TACCOMs, and first aid gear. It was chilly enough that evening that they were all wearing inserts under their BDU tops. The major difference between Evil and the Rangers was Evil was wearing one-piece flight suit. Evil wasn't sure until the last second whether Elmo was going to give him an inspection or not. Elmo was nominally in command of the patrol, but Evil was responsible for the patrol's underlying mission. Instead of inspecting Evil's gear and weapon and face camouflage like he'd done with the others, Elmo just stood in front of him and said, "We're good to go, sir." "Okay, Rangers, lead the way," Evil said. They walked out of the patrol prep room across the parking lot between land V's to one of the 6 double gates used for dismounted entrance into the free fire zone beyond the perimeter of G16A. Soldiers manning crew-served rail repeaters on a nearby tower watched them as they walked beyond the fences across the 50-meter area cleared of vegetation that surrounded G16A and waded into the overgrown weeds that led to the tree line another half-kilometer out. They maintained a 10-meter interval between each member of the patrol, even though there was no Triton line of sight for another 0.33 kilometers. They'd been rehearsing as a patrol for a couple days now, and they wanted to get into the swing of things right away. Having been one of the first terraformed to Earth standards, this asteroid had some of the oldest growth outside of Earth. Evil remembered as he pushed a branch out of his way when they breached the tree line. Oldest growth other than whatever the Tritons grew, if they grew anything on their territory. They all lowered their night vision optics as the asteroid's slow rotation put them in sudden darkness. It would be pitch black anywhere there was no artificial lights for the next 2.14 hours. The patrol worked its way up Hill 307 with Sergeant Baxter, the senior scout, in the point position. The infrared glowing pads on the backs of their gloves made hand signals easy to recognize in the dark, so when Baxter reached the summit, they all saw when he signaled for them to hold. They all stopped in position, strung out along the hillside amidst the trees, with their weapons each covering their assigned sector. After about half a minute, Sergeant Baxter signaled for them to continue ascent. Once they were at the top of the ridge, they dropped into a trench dug 10 meters down the opposite slope, where they couldn't be as easily silhouetted. 1 kilometer away, halfway across the Kemley crater, was Triton territory. The sensor tower still slowly pulsed. Strange green-tinted searchlights swept the valley floor from 50-meter-high watchtowers on the Triton side of the double fence line that represented the divide between the two sides. Off to the left, about 1.5 kilometers away, floodlights illuminated the small cluster of buildings where representatives of the Republic met with representatives of the Tritons to go over the armistice. It had been over 50 years since the last meeting. Since then, there had been no real contact with the Tritons other than observing them from a distance across the demilitarized zone. Evil looked at the watchtowers, hoping for some sign of movement, but knowing the windows were one way. Some of the military personnel compared seeing a Triton to seeing a Bigfoot. The frontline soldiers that they employed were armored, synthesized beings with enhanced cybernetic limbs. They were seen from time to time patrolling their side of the DMZ. Seeing one of them was like seeing a shy animal at the zoo that spent most of its time in a cave. Evil had seen photos, videos, and holograms of them, and even seen a couple patrols in the distance. There had never been a successful, clear image taken of an actual Triton, but Evil had seen sketches. Elmo signaled for the patrol to follow the trench to the right. The floor was plank and the sides were reinforced by thordoline bags. Every couple meters were firing positions with aiming stakes. When activated, display consoles set in the wall would give locations of known enemy positions on the other side of the fence. Sergeant Baxter maintained the point position while the other members of the patrol each covered their own part of the 360 degrees that surrounded them. Evil kept an eye outward, and he was the first to see them. Evil tapped Sergeant Westmore, who was walking in front of him, and signaled to stop with a closed fist. Westmore sent the message forward, and when all members of the patrol stopped and looked at Evil, he signaled that he spotted an enemy element off to the patrol's 10 o'clock. They all peered in that direction. Their night vision goggles automatically adjusted for range and gathering enough ambient starlight to create a glowing, ghostly green image. A patrol of 10 Triton bio-armored soldiers were emerging from a trench about 50 meters beyond the double fence line. They were each about 8 feet tall with dark gray metal bodies, an alloy Republic intelligence had so far been unable to figure out. They were armed with standard-issue Triton quantum blast rifles and wore spare ammunition magazines and explosive projectiles in nylon-like pouches slung over their armored bodies. Their heads were skull-shaped and made of the same metal as their bodies. Their eyes, if they had any underneath, were covered by a single black visor. At times a pair of glowing points of red light were visible. As they approached the fence, one of them raised some sort of scanning/recording device to its eye port and pointed it at Elmo's patrol. They knew they were being watched, and the information was probably being instantly relayed to whatever passed for a Triton command structure. Evil gestured for the group to tighten up around him while he brushed sticks and twigs away from a relatively flat area of ground. Then, using a pen-sized battery operated device he retrieved from his LBE, he projected a fuzzy but workable three-dimensional image of the area they were operating in. "I'm going to need you guys," Evil indicated Elmo and Sergeant Westmore, "to hook back, move outward, and do an MDL inspection. Sergeant Baxter and I will step off to the east. We will exit the JSA through Checkpoint Romeo. From there, it's approximately 5 clicks CR." They all nodded, all of them except Elmo, who looked concerned. Evil knew what Elmo was thinking. They should not split up, especially like this, without having planned it ahead of time. But Elmo nodded along with the others and kept his concerns to himself. As Elmo and Sergeant Westmore went down the wooded outward slope to the crater, Evil and Sergeant Baxter followed the curve of the crater's rim up toward the eastern edge of the Joint Security Area, also known as the JSA. As they drew closer to the floodlit, illuminated fence line that marked the eastern edge of the JSA, Evil periodically checked on the progress that Elmo and Sergeant Westmore were making. "Charlie November, this is Echo 6, over," Sergeant Elmo O'Connor said to Lieutenant Evil Nelson over their headset. "We are approximately 5 mics from the Delta Foxtrot Lima. Break." Elmo and Sergeant Westmore were 5 meters from the double fence line that protected the military demarcation line. Evil stopped Sergeant Baxter with a hand signal and looked through the scope of his rail repeater down at Elmo and Sergeant Westmore. From his elevated position, Evil could see the 2 Rangers as they walked west along the fence toward the Armistice campus, about half a kilometer away from their current position. There were 5 Tritons from the patrol he spotted earlier, but he swept his rifle outward, away from the bio-armored soldiers, trying to see as much as he could of the other side of the MDL, in an effort to locate the rest of the patrol. Where were they? "Sergeant Baxter, keep your eyes out for 5 tangos that were with the patrol but are missing now," Evil said. He could tell Sergeant Baxter had already noticed they were missing. Sergeant Baxter nodded, and Evil started them heading back toward Checkpoint Romeo at the eastern edge of the crater. As they got closer to the floodlit, illuminated area of the double fence line, Evil slid his night vision goggles up on his forehead above the visor of his soft cap. He went down on one knee and looked over at the MDL where Elmo and Sergeant Westmore were making their way west, while Sergeant Baxter automatically kept watch on Evil's blind side. Elmo and Sergeant Westmore were moving along about 10 meters from the fence line with about 5 meters between them. The Triton patrol was shadowing them on the far side of the fence on the other side of the MDL. He could see the striped posts forming a line between the 2 fences representing the actual border. He focused on the Triton that was walking second to last in the enemy patrol. He looked like the other soldiers in every way except one. He had an extra whip antenna rising from the metallic power pack on the back of his armor. This was so he could keep in contact with the next level of the Triton command structure, whatever that could be. Intelligence used to believe that a Triton configured like this was their equivalent of a radio telephone operator. But over the last year, based on first-hand observations from the field provided primarily by Republic infantry working in the DMZ, they were beginning to think that the Tritons with extra antenna were squad or platoon leaders or the equivalent. Checkpoint Romeo was located on a spot on the rim of the crater that dipped low, making it difficult for the other checkpoints on Guard Post Milhaco to provide overwatch. Eventually, Checkpoint Echo was established above about 100 meters further up the rim, closer to the MDL, and Checkpoint Romeo was officially closed. As Evil and Sergeant Baxter descended down the rim through the thick foliage, it became clear how the long-neglected guard shack was almost completely swallowed by weeds, vines, and sticker bushes. Sergeant Baxter moved in a quarter crouch as he pushed branches and vines out of the way, trying to hold them out of Evil's path as he came up behind the NCO. The Republic cameras on this part of the fence were all pointed at the Triton side, but over there, on the other side of the MDL, he could see the Triton sensor bulbs. They kept their silhouettes as low as possible, even though they both knew the sensor bulbs also worked on body heat, biotelemetry, and quantum displacement. As Evil passed the dilapidated guard shack and approached the gate, he hoped the Triton duty officer wasn't watching his remote sensor readouts too closely. Evil brought a strip of adhesive G-burn out of a pouch on his LBE, unwrapped it, and pressed it onto the metal plate that covered the latch that had been welded shut almost 5 years ago. He stepped back into the bushes and looked at Sergeant Baxter, who was holding his rifle high in a position ready to fire and watching all 360 degrees around them. Sergeant Baxter nodded at Evil, and Evil lowered his night vision goggles. He turned their night vision setting down almost all the way. The floodlights along these fences made them unnecessary. He pressed a small button on the bridge between the lenses, and a red dot appeared on the metal plate right next to the G-burn. Evil turned his head until the laser point was on the adhesive explosive and watched as a narrow tendril of smoke rose from the red dot. An instant later, the G-burn flared to life, and the metal plate started dripping down as it turned into a white-hot liquid. Evil pushed on the metal mesh of the gate, feeling the heat through the black leather gloves. It stuck for just a moment before it came loose and swung into the thick foliage. Evil had to push harder to get the gate open wide enough to accommodate both of them, and a moment later they were both through the gate. Now they were outside of the joint security area. Now no physical barrier between themselves and the forces.